Now, once you've kind of figured out what your two best images are, kind of got to look at them, and you can see I've got these two here. Again, I might or might not choose these two, but I'm going to show you the process by which we're going to go forward. Now, this is assuming, ladies, this is assuming that you don't have to do any editing in Photoshop. If you have to do editing in Photoshop, a little portion of this is going to be already taken care of if you've gone into Photoshop. But since I can't assume that everybody's going to go into Photoshop and do clone stamp or adjustment layers or anything like that, I'm going to do this demo based on the fact that you might not. Okay, but just realize, and it'll become readily apparent in a second, that a part of this is going to be already done. So if I have these two images, what we're going to do is we're going to put them together in a different program. We're going to put them together in a program called InDesign. Now, anytime you do images, together on one page, it's called a diptych or a composite. There's a couple different words for it. You can do it in Photoshop. That's fine. But I find that doing it in InDesign most of the time, not always, but most of the time, is a lot more flexible. It's a better program for what we're going to be doing. We're going to be just scratching the surface of how to bring images into InDesign. It's a very powerful program, and one of my favorites. I love it, and I think it's just awesome for creating books and pamphlets and designing all sorts of stuff where you're throwing photographs together and text on top of them and stuff. We're not going to go crazy with it, as I said before. But one of its drawbacks is that it does not see camera raw files. So we have to make our camera raw files into Photoshop files. So here's where we get to the thing, well, if you've already gone into Photoshop and started editing a photograph, guess what? You're going to be able to skip this first step. But let's just assume you haven't. Or maybe one of your photographs is being edited in Photoshop and the other is not. Well, the one that's a camera raw file that isn't being edited in Photoshop, we have to convert to a Photoshop file anyway. The easiest way to do this is just to open them both in the camera raw plugin, just like that. And then what you're going to do is you're just going to hit the select all button, so now they're both selected. And then we're going to go down here to where it says save images. This is going to pop up, and we're just going to keep the same document name. This should look a little familiar, yes. We're going to save in the same location, and we're going to choose a Photoshop document right here. Okay, there's our format, Photoshop, and we're going to hit save. And now you see right here it says 2 remaining, 1 remaining, and done. So now I can just literally hit cancel, and you'll see in the bridge a Photoshop file right here pops up. And notice that it's cool when it creates Photoshop files, they come in with the same stars as the camera raw version of themselves so that they stay in the same order. So now what we can do is, and you can rename them if you want them to be easy to find, but we don't have to worry about that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to open up InDesign, which I already have open, okay? And when you open it for the first time, it's going to kind of look like this. It's going to have a little, what they call like a splash page, okay? You can turn that off if you don't want it to ever show up again, or you can just click Create New Document. If this doesn't show up, let's just close it as if it didn't show up. All you have to do is go File, New Document, same thing. And then this is going to pop up. Now this is where things start to get a little strange, okay? And only for one reason. These measurements here are a little weird, okay? How many inches is a letter-sized piece of paper wide? Anybody know how many inches wide a letter is? 8.5. 8.5 by 11. Does that sound familiar? 8.5 by 11 inches. So if I choose my page size to be letter right here, okay, out of all these options, it should read 8.5 by 11. But it doesn't. And the reason why it doesn't is because InDesign by default, you can change this, but InDesign by default works off of another measurement unit called picas. And a pica is not a name that you call somebody when they annoy you. It is it's a term for one line of text. And there are 11 or 6 picas per inch. So if you take a look here at our height being 11 inches, that would make sense, wouldn't it? 66 picas equals 11 inches. Okay? Now, I only explain that because I don't want you to get too confused. Like, what the heck is this? Okay? We can change InDesign to something else. But for now, that's what you're going to see. What we're going to do is we're going to set it to tabloid. And a tabloid is an 11 by 17. And if you actually wanted to, you could actually type that in by just going 11, and then you have to put the IN for inches in there, and then watch what happens when I hit the tab key. It will convert it to picas for me. See? By 17 inches and tab. And you'll notice it goes to tabloid anyway. The next thing you want to do is decide whether you want a vertical or a landscape. Now in my case, if we just go back to the bridge here, obviously in this case these two images really are designed to be vertical. Okay, one on top of the other. Yours may be a horizontal. Yours may be neither, maybe a diagonal. I don't know. You can be as creative as you want with this. Okay, a lot of it depends on the photographs. But for now, I'm just going to choose vertical for the course of this demo, but realize you can do either. And I hate margins, so I'm going to get rid of the margins, just 0 and tab, and then it sets them all to 0. Click OK. And now I get this blank page here. And you're like, oh, that's wonderful. What do you do with that? Well, now we need to bring the Photoshop files in here. Most people make a mistake, and they go to Open. And then when they go to Open, all of a sudden they're going to look. We got that Photoshop file here, and let's go back to Bridge and see what's the name of that again. 1902 and 1841. So 1841 would be first. Oh, we're in the wrong folder. Always helps to get in the right folder. So there's my natural versus artifact. And oh, look at that, 1841. Can't click on it. Notice what it's saying down here. All readable documents. The open function only works for documents, not images. We're not going to open a doc. We're not opening a photograph. We're inserting it, or we're placing it. What we really need to do is give that photograph somewhere to go first. So I'm going to go over to my toolbar, and there's our frame tool right here. And I'm just going to draw a frame. Just like that. How do I know how big to draw it? I'm eyeballing it. We're going to adjust it later. And then I'm going to go back to the black arrow tool here and make sure that that frame is selected. And now we're going to place a photograph in that frame. See? Place. And now, oh, look at that. 1841 is selectable. And I'm going to click the Open button. Now it's going to come in and it's going to be too big. First off, usually. Okay? Now this may be annoying at first, but this is actually one of the strengths of InDesign, is that I can actually move this photograph around inside my frame. The easiest way to do that is to go to the white arrow tool. So the black arrow tool allows us to select the frame. The white arrow tool selects what's inside the frame. So if I click on that, you'll notice now all of a sudden you can see this other frame here, and you can see I can move the photograph around, but then when I let go, it crops it inside the frame that I've given it. Now this isn't completely true. If you use the black arrow tool and you click in the center circle here, now it also highlights the photograph and you can move around. So it does get a little confusing sometimes. If you want to move the frame around, you need to make sure you don't click in the center. You need to click off center, and then you can move it around. Notice it snaps to the center there. It's rather nice. Okay. And now if I want to resize this photograph, I can click in the center here, and there's a whole bunch of handy-dandy tools up here, and we can do one of two things here. Well, we can do a whole bunch of things. We can fit the content to the frame. We can fit the frame to the content. We can center the content. We can fit the content proportionally. In other words, notice that if the photograph is a rectangle and the frame is a square, it'll leave extra. Or here we can fill the frame, which is probably what we want to do. So let's fill it. Boom. Takes the shortest side and it matches it to it, but it leaves a little bit off. And I can move it around if I wanted to or whatever. Now I need to get my second photograph in. And I just recommend getting 2 pictures in there, getting the frames set up, and then you can start to play with them. Do I want them bigger, smaller? How do they match up? What's going to happen? So I'm going to then take the black arrow tool, click off the frame, and move this down until I get to the center here of the there. So there it's on the center, so I can kind of see what's going to happen. Now I'm going to hold the Option key down, I'm just going to drag a copy. This is the fast way of working. I like to work fast. I don't like to mess around. So how could I create another frame and have it be exactly the same size as the first one I created? Make a copy of it. That's the easiest way, right? Plain and simple. If I really wanted to, delete that, I could draw another frame like this. It'll be about the same here, but how do I know the height is the same? Well, I can use the black arrow tool. I can click on it and go up here. Oh, width is 63, height is 47p 10.5. 47p 10.5. Just type it in, and it makes the frame the same size as the other. So, I mean, but option dragging was a lot easier, wasn't it? Yeah. Okay. So now, if you do option drag, you don't need to worry about the fact that there's now two of the same photograph. Just make sure the frame is selected. Go File, Place, and let's find our second file, which was 1902. Oh, there it is. It's the blue one there. Photoshop file. Click Open, and there we go. Now, just like the other, now because we used a copy of the other one, it's already fit proportionally because it keeps the settings. Now I can start to kind of mess around with this. Now, as I'm looking at these, I'm noticing a couple things. One, the blacks don't fit. Okay, they're not the same black. That's a problem. That's definitely a problem. The nails don't line up with the icicles, and I have a choice. I can move them pretty easily. So let's look at how we would edit something from here. Okay, and I'm not going to go super heavy into detail, but just watch. So if I want to edit a photograph, here's what's really cool. I don't need bridge anymore. I mean, that'll work. But what's really cool is just make sure you've selected the photograph itself. And then you can right-click, and you can go Edit with Photoshop. See that? And that's the default. So if you just even hit Edit Original, it's going to open up Photoshop and allow you to edit the photograph. Now I'm just going to make one or two quick changes to show you. And what's neat is it's going to auto-update the photograph. So here I've got my image. And let's just say I need to move this over a little bit. So I'm just looking. I'm going to use the lasso tool, which is a cool way of creating a quick selection. Okay, I'm going to copy it and put it into a new layer, just like that. And now I can move it over. Now obviously that looks weird because I've got two of them. So I'm going to double click on my background, name it Layer 0, so I can add a layer mask to it. And then I'm just going to erase that one. Now you might say, oh, it's gray, Weisbrod, you got a big fat hole in there. Oh, okay, well we can fix that. New layer, drag it down, edit, fill with pure black, boom, gone. Yeah, that works pretty well. More pieces there. And I can do the same thing with this other one here. So I'll take the lasso tool. This one needs to move over just a little bit. Okay, whoops, well, it doesn't matter. Copy, paste it into a new, whoopsies. Aha, I pasted from the mask. Copy, paste, see I've got another one there. I can move that over just a smidge because it did need to go over a little bit. Go back to my layer mask, get my black brush, and now I can take care of some of the pieces that aren't so pretty here. Forget what that was in the background. Obviously I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I don't want this to take too long. But you get the idea. Use layer masks like I taught you. Now here's what's cool. Hit save. Maximum compatibility, yes. Now watch what happens when I go back into InDesign. Chink. Nope, I need to move it over just a little bit more. So I can right click. Oh, make sure you clicked on the photograph. Right click. And I can say Edit Original. And just move it over a little bit more. Save. Go back and see if that's enough. So you can just kind of work back and forth between programs It's getting there. Until things match up. I would then take this one here, and I would work on my adjustment layers to get this background to be completely black. Okay, so that the two blacks from this photograph to that photograph match. Okay, so once you start editing two images and you start trying to put them together, things get a lot more complicated because now they're, in a way, they're competing with each other. Does that make sense? And you don't want one to be weaker than the other. You need them to be about the same. You need them to have the same amount of quality, the same tonality, the same color balance. Everything has to match. So a lot of your work is going to be getting these two images to work well together. Some of that's positioning, some of that's color balance. You know, there's a lot of different factors that are going to come together to make this a very successful thing. But here's one thing that's also really cool about this. Let's say I like my frame size, but I want my icicles to be a little bigger. No problem. Just click on the photograph, grab the corner here, hold the Shift key down so you don't squish them. Shift key will make sure that you size, and you can crop and move things around within the frame really easily. You see that? So it allows you to edit a little bit more smoothly than you can in Photoshop because cropping and stuff doesn't happen that easily in Photoshop. Whereas here, I was just able to zoom and crop really easily right in the application, and then it's done. So it can be very handy to work this way. Now let me just say one last thing. If you want to do like fancy fading from one frame to the next and stuff like that, there are some things that we can do and some things that we would then have to do in Photoshop. So it might be conceivable, after playing around a little bit, that you can't get what you want in InDesign. If you're not sure, call me over and explain to me what you might want to do, and I'll help you decide whether or not you need to use InDesign or Photoshop to bring these two images together. 99.9% of the time, InDesign will do exactly what we want. Okay, so it's a pretty good program. This is a lot, but it barely scratches the surface of InDesign. It's an excellent program. Any questions? Okay.